Good morning, everyone. It's Dusty Pate with Inside Out Institute, your certified emotion code practitioner, as well as my guest for today, Dr. Peter Borten.
Hi.
I'm so excited that he's here. I'll just kind of give you an update on who he is. For those of you who don't know, he has been helping people achieve whole health for over 20 years. He's got degrees in Chinese medicine and the classic 5 elements of acupuncture. He's a certified
Qigong.
I always mess that up. Qigong instructor. Him and his wife are co-founders of the Dragontree and the founders of the Well Life Foundation, which is a nonprofit charity. They've written 4 books and developed the Dragontree's Life Coach program. He's got hundreds of articles on all aspects of wellness. He's created online courses on nutrition and pain management. He's just kind of all over. He's great. He's got all kinds of stuff. He lives out in Boulder, Colorado, correct? But you also work out of Portland, Oregon as well. 2 kids, cats, dogs, bees. Are you a beekeeper too?
It's mostly my wife, but I help.
That's awesome. That's totally awesome. So how did you get started on this path to just general holistic wellness and where you're at now in life? I mean, like, what got you started with this whole thing?
It's a few interesting things that happened when I was like a teenager. I started to get interested in psychology, and somehow among my group of friends, I kind of became the go-to person for like processing problems that were going on, or
Right.
it seemed that I had some kind of a knack for that. And meanwhile, I was born in Salem, Massachusetts, and there were lots of witchcraft stores there. It was actually way smaller there at that point than it is now. Post Harry Potter, everything is kind of
yeah, I'm sure.
And most of them were just kind of kitschy, sort of like, love potions and stuff like that. But a bunch of them were basically herb stores. And even though some people might have been going there to use them for like magical spells or something, for me, I started checking out these herbs and realizing, oh, there's herbal medicine, this whole thing that I had really no experience with. So I entered school as a psychology major thinking I'd be a clinical psychologist, but my interest in herbs really grew. I ended up switching to becoming a botany major, really diving into herbal medicine, and then after that looked for some kind of program, to get a professional degree that would let me practice herbal medicine. I went on to study acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine, and the rest is history.
Well, that's awesome. I know for myself, the herbal side of things is a great interest because there's so many things that we can do with, nature, what it provides for us. And, tinctures and things like that. Those are just awesome. I mean, you got to know what you're doing with them, but they are amazing. I know that for sure. You and your wife wrote a book called The Well Life. And I've read most of it. I didn't get through all of it, but I've read most of it. In that book, you guys described 3 areas of your life to like kind of focus on, or you broke it down with structure, sweetness, and space. So could you elaborate more on like what the well life is and how those little factors play into things?
You just cut out for me for a second there. Can you just repeat the last part of that? You were talking about the well life and how we describe what?
The structure, sweetness, and space.
Yeah.
So could you elaborate on like how those play a part in having a well life?
Yeah. That kind of vision of wellness, incidentally, my wife was trained in massage and in Ayurvedic medicine, and we both started around 2000, and it was probably 10 years into our practice before we both started thinking about wellness in broader terms, even than just mind and body, but kind of whole life wellness. And one of the things that she's especially blessed with is a knack for structure. She's a really good planner and a really good implementer of plans and can see if you're at point A and you want to get to point B, there's a way to get there that will be more successful than other ways. There, making a plan and having a clear course, having the vision to see how you're going to get there. All of that falls under the broad heading of structure and the ways in which we construct a life that will meet our needs and hopefully be enjoyable along the way. We talk in the book about how, some people are great at structure, but it's not an especially pleasant structure. It's sort of like walking through a concrete tunnel or something to get from point A to point B. It's like, if I follow this corporate path and I and I clock in and clock out and everything, then I'll get there, sure. But along the way, there won't be any nice scenery. So really, too rigid, right?
Yeah.
So that's where sweetness enters, and sweetness is really the ingredient of soul nourishing. Take your breath away, gratitude, all the things about life that are sweet, which unfortunately most people tend to put off until the end of the day or the end of their life. Whereas we feel that incorporating day-to-day sweetness means that, whether or not you actually achieve any of your goals, or regardless of how long you end up living, you won't have saved that stuff for the end. And of course, the sweetness is really nourishing to us. And it turns out that if we have a day full of recognizing everything that's sweet, really life could be quite simple and we could be very satisfied with it. And the third element is space, which is a recognition of kind of the formless aspects of being that are a dimension that is vast and yet often completely ignored by people. And really, we mean, in many ways, the spiritual dimension of life. Everything that we are, other than form, other than the stuff and the body, but the relationships, the connections, the essence, the growth, and everything else that occurs, the container in which the structure and sweetness are cultivated. And so those three are something that we, in that book, kind of help people evaluate, are they all present in equal measure, and is one out of balance or lacking? And by making sure that all of them are integrated into our lives, that makes for a pretty good life.
Yeah, it does. I like the fact that adding the sweetness in there, because while you may have a structure, you have things set up so that you can follow your plan, your vision, if you will. If you don't enjoy part of your day-to-day stuff and appreciate it, it just becomes almost like you're a robot. So that sweetness part just kind of actually, in my opinion, fuels the motivation, because if you're kind of essentially doing self-care, rewarding yourself, enjoying where you're going and that present moment, then when you wake up the next day and you're looking at that vision or that plan, that structure, you have more motivation. If you're just literally working like a little robot and thus having a very rigid structure, it makes it hard to keep having motivation to move forward. Now, in your speaking of structure, this beauty right here, by the way, everybody, this is called The Dream Book. And this is another book that him and his wife have established. And it is great for helping with structure. Basically, you want to describe exactly what the Dream Book is? Because I love it. It's a planner for those of you, but I'll let him kind of go into details about what exactly it does and how it's kind of laid out.
Yeah. I've actually been kind of making my own planners since early in my practice, because I didn't love how any of the others out there were laid out. So we already had some kind of templates for a planner. But over the years of working with clients, one of the things that came up over and over and over again is that people often struggle with incorporating the things that add sweetness or meaning, significance to their lives into every day and every week. And people also have a difficult time managing a life with many moving parts, which is pretty much everybody these days, and achieving goals. And so a lot of the time, we have a client who, in all other ways, they're healthy, their body is healthy, their mind is healthy, and yet they just couldn't make their life work in a way that was satisfying to them, or they didn't know how to, change things around so that they were really doing work that made them happy every day. And we realized that life management skills were something that most of us never got a lot of training in.
Oh no.
So this was an attempt to try to teach people first how to recognize their gifts and their values and their purpose, and have that be a guiding light for every day and everything they do, and then how to create goals and break them down into tasks, and then incorporate that all into a plan and put that into their schedule, along with lots of the stuff that makes life sweet. So that there have been just countless stories and reports from users who say that it's totally turned their life around, or that they're finally doing the work that they've always dreamed that they could do. It's been successful so far, so way beyond what we thought was possible. We kind of thought it was like, well, if nothing else, we're doing this for ourselves and it'll be a nice planner for us. And then it ended up becoming like the most successful thing of anything we've ever done.
That's awesome. I like the way you guys break it down. Here at Inside Institute, we would call it like our current reality, but you break it down as far as like 7 areas of your life, and you kind of assessing, where you're at, and kind of like what you would like to be at, whether that's, your spiritual aspect, your community aspect, jobs, and you just kind of break it down and assess that. And then I love how y'all then turn around and like, let's make some goals for those areas.
Yeah.
And when you do the goals, you're setting them for, say, a year out, 3 years out, 10 years out, a lifetime out. Mm-hmm. And it's so pretty on the inside too, as far as how everything, you can draw in color and, make it your own. But then then you set everything up into a quarterly basis, then a monthly. So it really does. It helps me break down what you're trying to achieve into smaller, more manageable tasks. Because I know for myself, if I'm like, I want to be X, how do I do that? And then it becomes overwhelming, the dreadful word of being overwhelmed, because you're like, I want to have control over this, but it just seems unable to overcome that because it just seems too big. So I like the way y'all break it down and make it where it's like bite-sized morsels instead of giant stuff that we have to handle. Now,
one of the big inspirations was that we realized that I need a lot of hand-holding in terms of following through with structures. I seem to be blessed on the creative side, and I can, do art and music and write things and so on. And I love doing my own healing work. But when it comes down to structure, it doesn't come naturally to me. And we realize that that's the case for a lot of people. So that structure that you talk about is really meant to be kind of like hand-holding. Like, we'll just be with you every step of the way until you get to your goal.
That's great. Everybody needs a little handhold. I know not everybody is organized or doesn't have the ability to conceptualize a good structure. So it's a perfect tool. Now, in your other book, The Well Life, you guys talk about emotional baggage and like forgiveness. Obviously, if you're sitting down trying to write out a plan, you're using the structure of the dream book and you're trying to find the sweet spot in life and make a vision. How does the releasing of emotional baggage play into like actually doing more with your life?
It's tremendous. And I'm sure that, with your background as an emotion code practitioner, you have had probably lots of examples where people were held back in ways that they didn't even realize. So to a great degree, I think that we tend to either pursue goals or life paths that our heart isn't really in because of emotional baggage, because we're trying to get someone's approval who appeared not to approve of us when we were like 7 years old in first grade, or because we believe that we're supposed to be such and such, we're supposed to be strong or pretty or whatever it is, and that's dictated our whole path for us without actually checking in to see if that's truly valid for us anymore.
Right.
And I think we tend to sabotage ourselves quite a lot because of emotional baggage. We end up, pretty much everybody has some kind of inner parent, inner child struggle going on where we're telling ourselves, you should be more whatever. And then there's the inner child that's like, don't tell me what to do. And,
exactly.
I've seen people deliberately derail what seemed to be like imminent success for themselves. And you have to wonder, like, what happened when you were, a child that caused you to want to wreck things for yourself just because you're like, don't tell me what to do. So there's a lot that can be done to clear emotional baggage, as you know. And to me, one of the most powerful basic tools is forgiveness, as you said. A lot of people don't really seem to understand the essence of forgiveness until they start practicing it. And especially when it comes to forgiving someone else, one of the things that one of the ways in which people respond is like, well, I don't want to forgive this person because what they did was wrong. And so there's some kind of re-education. I'm sure most people have probably heard that expression, something like, when you forgive someone, a prisoner is set free and the prisoner is you. So it's really all that spent, our own energy being invested in being kind of the warden of a jail in which unforgiven people are held. It doesn't really affect them, but it really thwarts our ability to expand and live to our potential.
They say a lot too that, like, if you're holding some resentment, you don't want to forgive somebody, usually you tend to be very angry with them, and all that anger is essentially like poison, and the only person you're poisoning is yourself. Yeah, day in and day out you're poisoning yourself, because that person is sitting over across town. They don't even probably even thinking about you. They could care less that they hurt your feelings or upset you at this particular time. So who's the one going over and over and over it and getting all worked up about it? It's you, not them.
Right. So, even if you can only muster, wanting to somehow get back at them, at the very least, how about not giving them any more of your own energy?
Exactly. It's a waste. It's a waste, and it just makes you feel yucky. I know in the book, you kind of broke down like being able to figure out where that emotional baggage is coming from, like what it is. You basically like list out the issue, and then you go into like, who are you blaming? Do you want to kind of go into like a good process on how you could figure that out and the steps that you would do to kind of like, for some of us who are like, oh my God, I'm just so overwhelmed. If I sit here and think about all my emotional baggage, they can't even focus. But like in the book itself, it has kind of like a little worksheet, like to make it a little easier.
Yeah. I have laid it out a few different ways. And so I can't remember the specific steps that we used in that book. I think there's like, what's the issue? Who are you blaming for it? Who is being held hostage by this? Right. And what is the resolution? Do you have the book in front of you?
No, I have it on the Kindle version.
Oh, it's
but
okay.
I do have the printout of the little chart.
Oh yeah. So I can explain those columns if you tell me them, because I've changed my
your approach a little bit.
Yeah.
And you obviously you write out the issue first,
Mhm.
and then we've got the blame, and you've got consequences, the opportunity, and the fix.
Right. So if you figure out what the issue is, if you identify the issue, then, you know, let's say you've been, for me, for instance, I've had a contractor that I've been working with who hasn't done everything the way that I would have liked. And so there's a lot of blame there. And that should be easy enough to figure out, although almost always I would say that there's some self-blame going on. Virtually always, when we're blaming someone else, there's some self-blame also. So in my case, for instance, I'm angry that the contractor isn't following this timeline, but if I feel into it even further, I am blaming myself for having chosen him and not having pushed him enough and followed up enough. Why did I choose this guy in the first place? All of that.
Good point. Very good point right there.
Yeah. Even, unfortunately, it's virtually always misplaced, but even in cases where somebody is so clearly victimized, like someone was attacked or something, there's still like, well, maybe I shouldn't have been, walking down that street at that time. And as you said before, it's just poison. And so what's the consequence of that? Most of the time it means that you're in a state of some kind of pain. Everybody can feel out what the consequence is for themselves. In my case, the example I'm giving with my contractor, nothing's really changing about how things are moving forward, except that I'm in a state of relative pain. I like to use the word pain as a sort of a broad heading because I think it encompasses most of the suffering that people go through.
Yes.
And that means not just a feeling of unpleasantness of some sort, but almost always also a resistance, an inner resistance to our own experience, that there's something unpleasant that's coming up. I don't like how this is going, and I don't like that I made these choices, and I resist that because I don't like it. And unfortunately, that resistance just turns it into this knotty complex, like not as in K-N-O-T, complex that's hard to let go of because our resistance to it keeps us in a strong relationship with it. And so in my case, if I were to say, what's the opportunity? Well, I have an opportunity to forgive myself, to feel freer in my body and in my relationships, to get better at making clear, direct communications, simply to be more at ease, to experience greater freedom. In a lot of cases, it just comes down to, are you going to argue with reality? Or because that will never help. It just doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
Or are you going to accept what is? And it sounds maybe easier said than done. And then the fix. Well, for everybody, you can decide for yourself. But in my case, I would say, well, it's to be part of the ongoing work of self-forgiveness and forgiving others. And as soon as that forgiveness happens, it's like there's an immediate shift. And I like to tell people to, I like to sort of frame forgiveness for people as not necessarily a one-time action, because very often people will think, all right, fine, I'm going to forgive my dad for being a bad parent or whatever. Okay. And then, the next day they're still grumbling about their father. Wait a second, I forgave him. Well, if you think about it, forgiveness doesn't tend to work that way. It's more of a commitment to let this go forever and to recognize when we've picked it back up and to keep letting it go, to keep forgiving. So it's an opportunity to keep forgiving, keep forgiving, keep forgiving, keep forgiving, keep letting go, keep releasing. And yeah. And for me, and I think this is true for a lot of people, it's a great opportunity to get better at making uncomfortable communications as soon as they need to happen. And most people don't like making uncomfortable communications.
Oh, no.
I know, I know a few people who I really admire because they just say, at the very first moment, I just want to clear the air. This or that is happening. And I say, almost always, I'm like, thank you for bringing that. I'm so glad, nobody, well, I wouldn't say nobody minds, but it's refreshing when
It is
somebody
refreshing.
calls out that there's an elephant in the room or something, and clears the air. So that's a great opportunity, almost in all these challenges.
Mm-hmm. I think people have a hard time, though, just confronting something straight on, because along with the emotional baggage and their own self-sabotage, they're probably already questioning themselves constantly, like, well, if I say this, I'm going to look like this, it's going to come across this way, people aren't going to respect me. I think ultimately ends up coming down to that general self-worth inside, even though they're probably lacking it. They don't feel like their opinion should be heard, that it doesn't matter. And if they do say something, then they're going to give the wrong image to people of who they are, what they really feel, because, we all just carry all of this stuff from us, because who knows, maybe when they were a kid and they tried to tell their dad or mom something of importance to them, and they were just kind of like, shut up, sit down, we don't need to hear you right now. I mean, that goes with you. That goes with you as an adult, because you'll start listening. You think nobody wants to hear what I have to say. It's not important.
Yeah, I think that the kind of story you talk about, everybody sort of has some equivalent of that, where as a kid something happened and they felt that they weren't approved of by their parents or teachers or whoever else, and because we have it wired in us that those are the people responsible for our survival, we get approval connected to survival. And for the rest of our lives, many of us are kind of unconsciously seeking approval and making a communication that's uncomfortable and might ruffle feathers. Our ego wants to protect us against anything that might threaten our survival. And if we think, well, they might not approve of us, and on some deep level we have that connected into our survival, then we don't want to make those communications no matter what.
I think that's where it's important. If you can recognize that you're doing that to yourself, always waiting for somebody's approval, always whatever. And then, of course, you start blaming yourself. Oh, I was so stupid to do that, blah, blah, blah. That's where the forgiveness to yourself comes into play.
Yeah.
Because, we're all human. We all have different things that we're dealing with. And there's nothing wrong with dealing with those things. Recognizing those things and working through them is where the important part comes into play. And then that way you can then get onto your dream book and start actually getting the life that you really want. You can structure, you can find where your passion is and where you feel you belong. I think a lot of times too, us ruminating over the fact that, we're not going to be accepted by our friends or family or whomever, and we base our survival off of that, then our dreams and our passion, we don't go after them because we think people are going to be thinking they're stupid or unrealistic or whatever. So I think that's where the self-sabotage comes into play, because we're sitting there thinking, I really want to do this, but everybody's going to judge me. Everybody's going to think, you're not going to do this, so why should I bother?
Yeah. One of the quotes from Conversations with God that stuck with me from a long time ago. I'm probably going to slightly butcher it, but it was something like the author's in this dialogue with God, and God says something like,
"It's a good book, very good."
One of the worst things you can do is to let others' experiences trump your own experience. maybe it's said a little bit more eloquently than that, but to let others define for you what's right for you, rather than trusting your own experience. And this is true of, this book is a spiritual book, so it's definitely something that a lot of people have experienced in the realm of spirituality and religion, where it's like, well, what feels true to you? What's your connection with the divine telling you versus, whatever spiritual institution you're part of tells you it should be like. But the same, of course, goes for choosing your life path, and letting that potentially be completely stifled by a feeling that other people might not think that it's the right thing for you.
Yeah, I think we worry way too much about what other people think or fitting into a certain mold, and that because of that we don't actually serve the purpose we were probably sent here for.
Yeah.
Essentially we just kind of stifle ourselves, like you said. So, well, it has been a tremendous pleasure interviewing you today. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. The information that you've provided as far as discussing, having a well life and the areas to focus on, and then getting some structure in our dream and forgiveness. I mean, these are things everybody needs to hear. Absolutely. Everybody
I wish
needs
I
to
had.
hear.
I wish someone had taught me in high school.
Yeah. They need to add this kind of stuff to the curriculum. Absolutely. I agree. Especially nowadays with as much stuff that's going on in the air right now.
Yeah.
That definitely we all need to stop and meditate, for lack of a better word, and think and be present and really
critical thinking.
Yeah, do some critical thinking and look inside, because I mean, so many people are so quick to judge others, and they're missing the important stuff that they themselves need to work on.
Yeah.
And I think if we could look inside at ourselves, we'd realize we're not different than the next person. We're all going through our own issues. We all have our own little demons in the closet we need to take care of. And we cannot expect somebody to understand us because they're not in our head. So how can we understand them? So we should stop being quick to judge and throw things out there like that, because they don't walk in our shoes. We don't walk in their shoes.
Yeah. I think the core values section of that dream book that you held up, I would guess that if you looked at the core values that people selected from that list, whether Republican or Democrat or, however far on the right or the left, probably these people, almost all, are choosing essentially the same core values. And when it comes down to what really matters to you, if we could just clear out all of the kind of divisive stuff that we've been immersed in recently.
Exactly.
And just come down to, the reality is we have actually pretty much the same core values. We're more similar than we are different.
Exactly. That's a good note to end on. Now, if anybody wants to check out Dr. Peter Borten's stuff, you can always go on, of course, Instagram. If they're at the Dragontree. So you can check that out on Instagram. Of course, they have their own webpage as well with all kinds of information at thedragontree.com. That's where you can find the various books. You can find your planner. You can look up more information. They offer online courses as well, and a plethora of information. Click, point, and go around on the website. It's awesome. So any other last words for our general audience listening in today?
Thanks for listening. And I hopefully, whether or not you choose to buy these books, hopefully our conversation here today has been inspiring.
Yes. I thank you again. And thank you everyone who joined in and listened. And actually those of you who will be watching the replay later, it will be on YouTube as well as Facebook. And anyways, you all have a wonderful and great day. Thanks again.